speaker, Dr. Faraz Hassini, is from Iran and has received numerous awards for his scientific and animal advocacy. He's the CEO of Allied Scholars for Animal Protection. He has a doctorate in biomedical sciences and a senior scientist at Good Food Institute. Please give it up for Dr. Faraz Hassini.
Well, hello. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Okay, there we go. So that's like Zoom, Zoom habits. So before I start, I want to thank the organizers for putting this together, because I haven't seen a lot of you, a lot of my good friends and fellow animal rights advocates. So good to see you here, and thanks for putting this together again. Really appreciate that. And I have to say I'm really honored to be on this stage with some of the strongest women that I know. So let's start. Okay, that's me. I look like a potato, and that's my mom. So I was born and raised in Iran, in Tehran. My native language is Farsi or Persian, and that's precisely why I don't speak English. I did my undergrad in Iran, then I left. I moved to the US. I did my master's and doctorate in biomedical sciences. And after my doctorate, I had a couple of postdoc offers from MIT and other places, but I really wanted to help humans. I work in pharmaceutical companies, and now what I do is, because of their effective work, I joined GFI, so I work as a bioprocessing senior scientist in GFI. I also am the CEO of Allied Scholars for Animal Protection. I'm a chapter organizer for Anonymous for the Voiceless, and I also advocate for alternatives to animal testing. So I have a session on that at 12:15. So please come and watch and learn more about this neglected part of animal rights. Okay, this is for me to remind myself, to ask you, because I want to learn more about you. So how many of you in this room are vegan? Oh, wow, this is more than 5% that people say. That is surprising. How many of you identify as feminist? Nice. How many of you identify as LGBTQ? Come on, we need more gay people. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. So what I'm hoping to do with this presentation is to look at other forms of oppression and social justice movement and see what we can learn from them and apply to animal rights advocacy. So you've probably heard about what's going on in Iran. So a 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, she got basically arrested and beaten to death because of her improper hijab. And that started a shitstorm, so now a lot of strong men and women are on the streets fighting for basic human rights, and I fully support them. But this is not the first time that there's been protests in Iran. I went to University of Tehran. This is one of the top 2 universities in Iran. I did my undergrad in chemical engineering, and if you go to this university, you believe that this is the better one out of the 2. No biases. So what I want to talk to you about is this day. This is about 2009, one of the protests that I attended. Behind the gates, you see the students protesting peacefully for basic human rights, and I was amongst them. And the police was throwing tear gas at us and all that. But something really terrible happened. This guy on the ground, his name is Ali. He's one of my friends. All he did, he walked on the other side of the gate, and all he did was showing us a peace sign to support us. Next thing I know, he was attacked by paramilitary forces, and it started beating him in the head with batons. And not one person, but 3 or 4. I don't really have the right words to describe what it means when one of your closest friends is getting beaten in the head in front of your eyes. But the memory is vivid, because I remember my hands smelled like iron from holding this gate, trying to open it, trying to help our friends who was screaming from pain and agony, the smell of tear gas and all of that. And as I thought it's not getting any worse, paramilitary forces broke inside the university and attacked us. So I was tear gassed, so I could barely see. But I see an army of people in front of me, and one of them raised his hand with a machete, and he said a very bad word because I literally froze, but because of the bad word, that was my cue to run, because I couldn't tell if they were students or paramilitary forces. And I ran as fast as I could. I've never run that fast in my life. This is the closest I've come to death. Literally 15 feet away, a guy running after me with a machete to kill me. But remember this, because I'm going to come back to it. Another thing I want to share with you is that I'm gay and I grew up in Iran. Probably the biggest regret of my life is that 22 years that I spent in Iran in that oppression and in an environment that is very oppressive to LGBT folks. For 22 years of my life, I was fighting who I was. I thought I was mentally ill. I thought this is not natural. I thought this goes away. I even forced myself to have a girlfriend. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. You're probably wondering about these parrots here. So when I was 22 years old, I moved to the US. I finally came out to one of my colleagues in the cancer center here. And I said, hey, yeah, I'm gay. He said, well, duh. I said, God damn it, how could you tell? He said, well, just look at what you are wearing. I bet you can find a parrot that matches your style every single day. And we are scientists, so we had to test the hypothesis, and he was right. Oh, you're going to get upset with the rest of the presentation. Don't get excited. So as you know, homosexuality is punishable by death in Iran. And they actually have acted upon these laws before and hanged gay people for who they are. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because I think for facing these kinds of oppression and coming so close to dying for who I am or protesting against the government for basic human rights, I could make this connection between social justice movements and animal rights. But it didn't happen naturally. It happened because of one of my friends. Her name is Maral. She's a good childhood friend. And at some point in my life, she came to me and she said, Faraz, you always say that you care about humans, you fight for, you say you love animals, but you eat them. She said that in the nicest way possible, and I still got upset. I was mad at her. How dare you challenging my morality? I'm a good person. I fight for humans and all that. You know the deal, right? And a side note here, let this be a lesson for all of us, because if she didn't tell me, if she was worried that I get upset, I would never be here today and talking about veganism with you all. So don't let that stop you to speak the truth. Going back to her, after 3 months, I was like, she's right. I was very furious about what happened to my friend Ali, but at the time I was living in Germany and my favorite food was bratwurst, and I gave zero shit about what happened to pigs. I said I was against hanging gay people for who they are, but I ate chicken and I supported hanging chickens for who they are. I said I'm pro-women's rights and human rights, but I sat and ate dairy. I don't know any other industry that is as abusive to females of other species as is dairy. So I started to think, where does this disconnect come from between human rights and animal rights? To show you how deep this goes inside all of us and how I also was a victim of this from really early ages, let me show you this. So this is me when I was 7. I had this chicken. He grew up to become a very loud and healthy big rooster. His name was Happy, literally the English word for happy. Happy was in fact the first English word that I learned as a kid after Mr. Happy. He was loud, so we had to give him to my grandma because she had a big yard. One day, I went to her house and I was looking for him. I couldn't find him, so I asked my grandma, where's Happy? She said, oh dear Faraz, I'm so sorry, the door was left open, he ran away. I was really sad because I thought he loved me and he would never leave me. I went around the neighborhood because I was worried that he'd get hit by a car. 10 years later, my mom says, the chicken soup we had that night. She betrayed my childhood innocence. She killed the individual who meant so much to me and fed him to me and lied to me. But worse than that is that day I knew I had chicken. But I was happy because I knew it wasn't Mr. Happy. So why is that? Speciesism and cognitive dissonance. Speciesism is discrimination against members of other species based on the false assumption of human supremacy. Cognitive dissonance is when we say we love animals, but we consume animal products, meat, egg, dairy, fish, all that. When I started seeing the similarities between human rights and other forms of social justice movements, it really impacted the way that I do animal advocacy. So human rights, we acknowledge that we are different, right? I have a different race than you. I have accent, you probably don't. I'm gay, you're unfortunately probably not. So we acknowledge these differences, but we realize that our differences are not morally relevant to the way that we are treated, right? In fact, any time in history where we focus on our differences, that's exactly what led to sexism, racism, and other forms of human oppression. So the question is not with whom I make love. The question is, if you stab me, it hurts. And if you oppress me, I will suffer. And the same is true about animal rights. So animal rights doesn't mean that we are not different than other species. We are, but we realize that our differences are not morally relevant. And I have a version of it, which is speciesism for dummies, which is basically animal rights doesn't mean a cow should vote. It means that if you stab me, it hurts. If you stab a cow, it hurts. By comparing animal rights and making the connection between animal rights and other forms of social justice movement, I've been able to see a lot of people see what I see and go vegan. So I started volunteering for Anonymous for the Voiceless, and that really changed the way that I do outreach. And I made this flowchart. I know you can't read it, but please come to me. I want to share this with you because it makes a huge difference in the way that you do advocacy. But basically, with AV, we show footage of industries that abuse animals, and we ask people how they feel about that animal abuse. Most people say they hate it. Then we simply ask, if you don't like it, what stops you from going vegan? Now, do you know what are the most common responses we get? What if they were treated more humanely? I'm going to reduce my consumption. So these are the natural responses that people get, and we are not helping it. Because ironically, all of our efforts to promote humane treatment of animals and reduction and all of that suddenly become the biggest obstacle that prevent people from going vegan. So for me as an activist, my job is to make this connection, and every time I do that, people actually go vegan. It works almost all the time. What do? I say, would you use any of these solutions for any other form of injustice? Would you say, like reduction and humane treatment, would you use that for any other form of injustice? For instance, if I'm beating my children, you come and try to stop me, and I say, okay, fine, I'm gonna beat my child, only 1 day a week. No beating on Mondays. People laugh because it's laughable. So sometimes the solutions that we have for animal rights, if you go and apply it to other forms of injustice, they become laughable and they become extremely offensive to victims. And as someone who's been through a lot of forms of oppression myself, that's not how I want to be advocated for. So when it comes to environmental stuff, I think reduction is a great way to reduce environmental impacts. As someone with a doctorate in biomedical sciences, I think it really helps when I encourage people to reduce their animal product consumption because they're harmful. When it comes to animals, it's a little different. There's about 8 billion people on this planet. We kill 80 billion, 80, land animals every year. Because of the scale, I think they deserve to have their own rights. So when you fight for animal rights, for animals, you are fighting for individuals and you're fighting for victims. And because of that, animal rights becomes a social justice movement, and as such, it deserves to be treated that way. What do I mean by that? Please, for a second, put yourself in place of these people who are being hanged for who they are. This could be you. If this was happening to you, would you want me to stay here and I say, hey, let's just kill fewer people. Let's just kill the guy on the left. The rope probably hurts their neck. Let's just buy better ropes so they're not suffering as much when they're being hanged. Or do you want me to stay here and say, killing people for who they are is wrong and it needs to stop immediately? I don't know about you, but I want the last guy to advocate for me. So when you focus on victims, there are a couple of benefits. So this is a dog that I rescued. First of all, you never cheat on your ethics. How many of you have been on a diet before and you cheated on your diet? Right? So when you do veganism or plant-based diet for environment or health or whatever, you cheat. But when you do it for the victims, you're less likely to cheat. You're more likely to go vegan faster, you're more likely to stay vegan, and you're more likely to become an advocate for animals. When was the last time you saw a flexitarian or reducitarian who's advocating for animals? Doesn't happen that often, right? And when we change the perspective, so somebody was telling me it's really hard to be vegan, and sometimes I crave meat and all that. And I said, when was the last time you craved meat so much that you look at your dog and you said, well, that's it, I'm gonna eat you? He laughed. Because our perspective is that this dog is not food. So every time we are thinking about reduction or humane treatment, that means we are still looking at animals as objects. And so if we change this perspective, people make the right choice. And it's on us as animal rights advocates to help them make this connection. And you'll be consistent with the way that you treat racism, speciesism, and other forms of oppression. So I go to LGBT clubs they invite me to talk about careers and LGBT experiences. Little they know it's all gonna be about veganism, haha. So I show them this picture of these chickens and I say, what do you think about this? They say, oh, it's tasty. I was like, what about now? Nothing changed. The chicken is still the chicken, but now they have this little piece of information that it comes from Chick-fil-A. Now, all the stupid shit that Chick-fil-A has done for against LGBT folks, they know that, and suddenly they don't look at this chicken the same way. So that's the power of changing people's perspective. Now, how do we do that when we do vegan advocacy? These are my top 3 questions. So before I go through this, I ask people, do you agree that this is injustice? They say yes. What's happening to animals? Then I say, well, do you recommend any of these things that you're telling me, reduction, humane consumption, all of that, as a form of solution for any other form of oppression, like beating the child? They say no. I say, put yourself in place of the victim. If this was you, if someone was abusing you, how urgently would you want they stop? Do you want them to stop immediately, or would you want them to take baby steps, maybe someday when they feel like it? They say no immediately. I say, do you think it's harder for you to go vegan, or do you think it's harder for them to go through that, for the animals? They agree. So I didn't do anything but changing their perspective, and it's the most effective way to do that. So suddenly, somehow, when it comes to animal rights, things such as reduction and humane treatments and other become a sound solution, while there are not sound solutions in other forms of injustice. And I want to say that when we take away this chance from people to do the right thing, when we don't make this connection and give them easy solutions, here is your humane meat, we are responsible because we are not giving them the chance to do the right thing with not talking about it. This is my last slide. So this is my favorite quote from MLK, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But let's do a last thought experiment. Think about a social justice leader that you really admire, MLK, Gandhi, whoever. Think about them for 1 second. Ask yourself, do you like them because they compromised for the victims, because they did, they diluted their message, they try to appeal to masses, they try to earn more funding and donations? Or do you like them because they spoke the truth, they fought for victims like no one else, and they didn't settle for anything less than abolition of discrimination and violence? I think the latter. And that's precisely why they won. So the take-home message, let that be, if you say that you care about other forms of social injustice, you've got to go vegan. And once you go vegan, please fight for animals the same way you fight for other forms of human oppression. And with that, I'm going to close. I have a nonprofit, Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, where we empower students to fight for human and non-human animals alike. And I will not shut up until abolition of speciesism. Thank you so much for your time and for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.